Her mother-in-law treated her like a slave. She was hidden away, humiliated and forgotten. But what happened next will shock you. The same woman who was pushed to the lowest place suddenly claimed the throne, turning the palace upside down and changing the fate of an entire kingdom forever. When Adaku first stepped into the grand palace of Nkumbale, she wasn't wearing gold or silk. Her feet were bare, her dress was simple, and her eyes carried more dreams than pride. She had just married Prince Ezugwu, the first son of the royal family, a man she loved with her whole heart. But the palace didn't welcome her with joy. It stared at her like she didn't belong, and no one stared harder than Queen Talami, Ezugwu's mother. The moment Talami laid eyes on Adaku, her face tightened with disgust. "This is the girl you brought into my palace?" she hissed to her son. "She has the hands of a farm girl and the voice of a market woman." Adaku stood silently, bowing with respect. She didn't respond. She didn't cry. She just lowered her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Mama." But behind that whisper came the beginning of her suffering. From the next morning, Adaku was given no room of her own. She was told to sleep in the old kitchen behind the palace, near the firewood and rats. Her clothes were taken and replaced with torn wrappers. While others dined in gold plates, she washed them. While other women of the palace soaked in scented oils, she scrubbed toilets and carried buckets of water on her head. She wasn't called a daughter-in-law. They called her the servant bride. Ezugwu, the man who had once promised her the world, said nothing. He watched his mother humiliate his wife and kept silent. "It's just for now," he would say quietly. "Things will change." But they never did. Day after day, Adaku woke up before the sun to clean the palace floors and feed the guard dogs. At night, she listened to laughter from the royal halls while she ate cold yam in the kitchen. During palace events, where royal daughters and wives danced in jewels and silk, Adaku was locked inside the storeroom, wiping windows and ironing royal clothes. If she even stood near the palace gates during a ceremony, Talami would shout, "Hide your shame! You don't belong here!" The guards laughed. The maids mocked her. Even the village women whispered, "How can a prince marry such a girl?" But Adaku never argued, never raised her voice. She greeted everyone with calm respect. She thanked Talami every time she insulted her. And each night, before she lay down on the cold kitchen floor, she whispered a quiet prayer, not for revenge, but for strength. Because deep inside, Adaku carried something stronger than gold, patience. And though the palace saw her as a slave, destiny had already chosen her for something greater. But no one, not even Adaku, could imagine that the same feet that carried water and swept floors would one day walk across the palace courtyard, straight to the throne. Adaku woke up before the roosters each morning, her hands rough from scrubbing floors, her back sore from lifting heavy water jars. The kitchen floor was her bed, and the cold night air her blanket. But no one ever heard her complain. She wore a gentle smile, even when her heart was breaking. Every insult, every harsh chore, every cold meal was swallowed in silence. She held her tears until no one was watching. Queen Talami was ruthless. Every day she found a new way to humiliate Adaku. One morning, she ordered her to clean the royal animal pens with her bare hands. "A girl like you is used to filth," she said with a cruel smirk. While the maids giggled, Adaku walked silently to the pens and began her task, not even flinching when the dung touched her skin. Later that same day, she was told to shine the guards' dusty boots under the blazing sun. The guards laughed as she knelt before them. "So this is the prince's bride," one whispered. "She looks more like a beggar's daughter." Still, Adaku smiled and polished the boots until they reflected the sky. People threw words at her like stones. Worthless, dirty, useless. But she caught them with grace. She greeted every maid with respect, served every elder with a bowed head, and never once responded with bitterness. Even when they laughed at her behind her back, she acted like she didn't hear. But inside, she felt the sting of every word. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was strength. Ezugwu saw it all. He watched his mother break Adaku down, piece by piece. He watched her scrub, bow, carry, and suffer. But he said nothing. Fear held him by the throat. He was a prince, yet still a boy in front of his mother. He loved Adaku once, but that love had grown quiet, buried under the weight of royal expectations. Whenever Adaku looked at him with tired eyes, hoping for comfort, he turned away. "Just endure a little more," he whispered once. But how much more could she take? Still, Adaku never raised her voice at him. She served him his food with respect, even when her own stomach growled. She ironed his robes, folded his clothes, and treated him like the prince he was, though he had forgotten how to be her husband. To everyone else, she was just a shadow in the palace, but to herself, she was still the girl her mother raised, a girl of dignity and strength. Each night, after a long day of cruel commands and harsh stares, Adaku knelt quietly in a corner of the kitchen. She closed her eyes, whispered her silent prayers, and reminded herself that storms don't last forever. She believed that one day, the same people who laughed at her suffering would bow at her feet. But for now, she wore her pain like a cloak and continued to walk through fire with her head held high. The Festival of Flames was the grandest event in Nkumbele. Every year, the palace courtyard lit up with fire torches, music echoed through the village, and the royal women dressed in their finest robes, glittering with gold and gems. It was a time for beauty, pride, and celebration. Every noble woman waited all year to walk across the royal stage, to show the world their elegance and power. Adaku, like every girl growing up in the village, had once dreamed of that day. But now, living inside the palace, she wasn't preparing for the festival. She was preparing the buckets of water for the cleaning, sewing gowns for the other women, and roasting meat in the heat of the kitchen fire. Queen Talami had made it clear, Adaku was not to be seen at the festival. "This is for royal blood," she snapped, "not for barefoot village girls." The other women paraded around Adaku in their silk gowns, tossing her old wrappers aside as they changed. "Don't even think about peeking through the curtains," one of them laughed. "You'll embarrass the royal family with your presence." Adaku said nothing. She helped them dress, pinned their hair, and adjusted their jewelry with careful hands. Then, she quietly stepped back into the shadows, her eyes filled with quiet longing. While the drums beat and dancers twirled outside, Adaku was on her knees scrubbing the hallway near the king's chambers. The smell of roasted goat and sweet spices floated through the air, teasing her empty stomach. She wiped the sweat from her face and continued scrubbing. She didn't know anyone was watching her. Hidden behind a curtain, the old King Obinna stood still, silently observing. He had come out to enjoy the festival, but paused when he saw the young woman cleaning the floors, her wrapper soaked with sweat, her face calm despite the hard labor. He had seen many women in jewels and silk, but none had shown the quiet dignity this one did. Adaku didn't notice him. She simply kept working, humming softly to herself, lost in her own world. The king's eyes narrowed with interest. He had heard whispers of the servant bride, the girl his son had married without ceremony. But this was not a weak woman. This was someone with quiet strength, someone with a fire that didn't need to dance on a stage to be seen. As the celebration roared outside and laughter filled the palace halls, Adaku continued working, her bare feet moving through puddles, her hands red from scrubbing. She didn't cry, she didn't sigh, she simply did her duty, as she always did. And that night, as the torches lit up the sky and Queen Talami basked in praise, the old king stood in silence, watching the girl in the shadows. He said nothing, but something in his heart shifted. The Festival of Flames had always revealed beauty. This year, it revealed something else, true strength, hidden in plain sight. Her name was Adaku. The palace gates opened wide one morning as the royal oracle, Ora Mabina, arrived without warning. Her presence alone made the air still. Dressed in flowing robes made of bark cloth and beads that rattled with each step, she walked with the confidence of someone who spoke with the spirits. No one summoned her. When Ora Mabina came, it meant the ancestors had a message that could not wait. The king sat upright on his throne as she entered the great hall. Queen Talami, dressed in gold and seated proudly beside him, barely hid her annoyance. She had always found the oracle's visits disruptive, but the room fell silent as Ora Mabina raised her staff and closed her eyes. Her voice echoed deep and strong as she spoke. "A new dawn approaches. A queen shall rise from ashes wearing no royal blood, but she will hold the heart of a nation." Gasps filled the hall. Whispers spread like wildfire. What did she mean? No royal blood? Who could that be? Ezugwu looked confused. The nobles shifted uncomfortably, but one face stayed calm in the corner. Adaku, holding a tray of fruits, unnoticed and unimportant, but listening closely. Queen Talami scoffed loudly. "Rubbish! What nonsense is this? There is no queen without royal blood in this palace." She laughed mockingly. "Tell your spirits to check again. My son will marry a real princess, not some kitchen maid." Ora Mabina opened her eyes slowly and turned her head toward the queen. "You may laugh now," she said softly, "but when the fire clears, only truth remains." Her voice was calm, but her words stung. Talami's face turned red with anger. Enough of this witchcraft. Who paid you to spread such foolishness? Is this the work of villagers jealous of the palace? The king raised his hand, silencing the argument. Let her speak, he said, his eyes focused on the oracle. But Ora Mabina said no more. She turned and walked out as mysteriously as she had come, leaving behind confusion, fear, and a prophecy that refused to be forgotten. The palace buzzed with tension after her visit. Some nobles dismissed her words, calling them fairy tales. Others wondered who she was speaking of, but no one looked at Adaku. No one thought it could be her. She was invisible to them, just a poor girl, just the prince's shame. Queen Talami became more furious each day, as if the prophecy was a personal insult. She held private meetings, ordered the guards to keep watch on villagers, and accused the oracle of stirring rebellion. But no matter how loud her voice got, she couldn't silence the echo of those words. And Adaku? She kept sweeping floors and serving meals. But now, something inside her had shifted. The words, "rise from ashes," played over and over in her mind. She didn't understand it yet, but her heart began to believe. The sky over Nkumbele turned dark the day the drums beat without rhythm. The palace was silent, heavy with fear. King Obinna had fallen ill overnight, and by morning, he was gone. The news broke like thunder across the village. Strong, sudden, and terrifying. People wept in the streets. Some whispered prayers. Others whispered rumors. In the halls of the palace, tension exploded. The royal healers were confused. No wounds, no signs, just death in his sleep. But among the servants and guards, a dangerous rumor began to grow. Queen Talami had poisoned him. They said she had been furious since the oracle's prophecy. They said she wanted total control. They said she would stop at nothing. No one dared speak these things aloud, but everyone felt it. Prince Ezugwu, once proud and steady, crumbled. He sat in the garden for hours, silent, lost. Adaku tried to comfort him, but he barely looked at her. Days later, he vanished. No word, no note. His horse gone, his sword left behind. Some said he went to the mountains to grieve. Others feared he had run from the crown. With the king dead and the prince missing, the throne was empty. That was all Queen Talami needed. Within days, she seized control. The elders resisted, but she silenced them one by one, replacing them with her loyal followers. Her voice became law. The royal crest was stitched into her robes. She claimed she was acting to protect the kingdom, but everyone knew she was claiming power for herself. And Adaku, she was forgotten even more. No longer called a princess, she was stripped of the little dignity she had. Her quarters were taken away, and she was ordered to sleep in the servant hall. Her days became longer. She scrubbed palace floors, served heavy trays, and washed the queen's garments by hand. Talami made sure everyone knew. Adaku was not part of the royal family. She was nothing but a maid now. Other maids pitied her, but most were too afraid to speak. Some even mocked her, trying to please the new queen. From bride to broom, they joked behind her back. Adaku heard it all, but said nothing. Her hands worked, her feet ached, her heart burned, but she stayed silent. Queen Ptolemy strutted through the palace as if she had won a great battle, but even in her power, she kept an eye on Adaku. Deep down, she feared the prophecy still. She feared that the girl she had turned into a slave might be the very one the oracle spoke of. So she watched, and she crushed Adaku at every chance, hoping to destroy whatever spark fate had placed in her. But Adaku endured, bruised, tired, broken, but not finished, because somewhere in the mountains, the rightful prince still breathed, and in the shadows of the palace, a girl with nothing left was being sharpened like a blade in fire. The palace had changed, power had shifted, but the story was far from over. The sun had just begun to rise when Adaku entered the late king's study, now dusty and untouched since his death. Queen Talami had forbidden anyone to step inside, claiming it was sacred ground, but the head maid had ordered her to clean it thoroughly before guests arrived for the king's remembrance. So Adaku obeyed, sweeping past cobwebs and silence. She worked quietly, careful not to break anything. The room smelled like old parchment and fading memories. As she dusted the corner shelf, a loose wooden panel shifted under her cloth. Curious, she tugged gently, and a small drawer popped open, hidden, unseen. Inside, wrapped in silk, was a scroll. Her hands trembled as she unrolled it. The handwriting was familiar, bold and elegant. It was King Obinna's. The ink had slightly faded, but the words were clear. every stroke powerful. To the one who walks with grace and serves with a heart of gold, it began. Adaku's breath caught. The letter spoke of how the king had silently watched her since she first entered the palace. He had seen how she worked, how she spoke kindly to even the rudest guards, how she bore insults without hate. He wrote that royal blood meant nothing if the heart was not noble. In a kingdom filled with greed and pride, he had seen something rare in her, true strength. I have chosen you, the letter read, not by law, but by spirit. You are the flame that will guide this kingdom. You are the queen Nkumbele needs. Adaku's eyes filled with tears. At the bottom of the letter was the royal seal, golden, pressed deep into the parchment, unmistakable. It was real. She clutched the letter to her chest, her heart pounding. In that moment, everything changed. She wasn't just a maid. She wasn't just the girl the queen tried to bury. She was chosen by the king himself. But this was dangerous. If Queen Talami found out, she would destroy it. She would destroy her. Adaku quickly wrapped the letter back in its cloth and slipped it deep into her dress. She looked around to make sure no one saw. Her mind raced, her hands shook, but her eyes were steady now. The weight of the letter was heavy, but it gave her strength. All this time, she had believed she was forgotten. All this time, she thought her kindness meant nothing. But the king had seen her, and he had trusted her with the future of Nkumbele. Adaku walked out of that study no longer just a servant. She had no crown, no throne, and no allies, but she had a truth no one could take away. And deep in her soul, a fire had been lit. She wouldn't run, she wouldn't hide, she would rise. Because even if the world forgot her name, the king had remembered, and he had passed the throne, not by force, not by blood, but by faith. And now, that faith lived in her hands. Word began to spread through the village of Nkumbele, not by force or trumpet sound, but through quiet whispers and grateful hearts. Adaku, once mocked as nothing more than a palace maid, had begun to move among the people with silent strength. She walked through muddy streets with a basket of herbs, helping mothers whose children burned with fever. She stayed up late beside old women's mats, whispering comfort and placing warm cloths on aching joints. She did not ask for anything. She only served. Soon, villagers started waiting at the palace gates just to speak with her. A farmer brought her yams as thanks after she healed his swollen foot. A young girl clung to Adaku after she helped stop her arranged marriage to a cruel old man. Her name was now spoken with reverence in homes, at markets, and around fires at night. One morning, as the sun poured gold over the rooftops, a knock came on her small door behind the palace. It was Elder Bako, one of the oldest and most respected men in Nkumbele. He bowed his head and said, "The Council of Elders invites you to our next gathering. We want your voice in matters of peace and justice." Adaku's eyes widened. No palace maid had ever been invited to such meetings. But Elder Bako only smiled. "The people trust you more than the crown." News reached Queen Talami like a slap to the face. She stormed into her chambers, her fingers trembling with rage. "That low-born girl is poisoning the people with fake kindness," she shouted. "She's turning them against me." She summoned her guards and sent them with a cruel order. Adaku was to be exiled from the kingdom before nightfall. She accused her of defying palace rules and stirring unrest. No trial, no hearing, just silence her and remove her forever. But when the guards arrived to drag her out, they were met by a wall of villagers, men, women, children, all standing between Adaku and the queen's soldiers. Some held farming tools, others held nothing but firm eyes and steady feet. Elder Bako stepped forward. "She has broken no law. You will not take her from us." The guards hesitated. One of them, a young man named Tibu, lowered his spear. "She saved my sister's life," he whispered. Back in the palace, Ptolemy paced like a lioness. She had ruled with fear, but fear was fading. And now, for the first time, she felt something new in the air, resistance. Adaku returned to her small room quietly that night, but everything had changed. She had no throne, yet the people were calling her queen, not with crowns or gold, but with trust. She looked up at the stars and remembered the king's letter hidden beneath her bed. He had believed in her before anyone else. Now the people believed too, and soon the whole kingdom would see why. The sun rose slowly on the day of judgment, casting a red glow over Nkumbele. It was the day the ancestors would speak, the day the kingdom would discover its true leader. Everyone gathered in the sacred circle. an ancient ground where generations of rulers had been crowned. Drums echoed through the village, calling nobles, villagers, and elders to witness the ceremony. Queen Ptolemy arrived dressed in shining gold. Her gown trailed behind her like a river of pride. Her crown sparkled, and her eyes gleamed with confidence. She held her head high, smiling at the crowd as if the throne already belonged to her. The guards stood tall beside her, and the royal ministers nodded in agreement. To them, it was already done. Ptolemy would be queen. The village oracle, Ora Mabina, stood beside the sacred drum of fate, the drum that only spoke for the chosen one. According to tradition, the drum would sound when the rightful heir stepped forward. It was the will of the ancestors, not blood, not power, not gold. Ptolemy raised her hands and stepped into the circle, expecting the drum to roar in acceptance. But the moment her foot touched the center stone, a sharp crack echoed through the silence. The sacred drum split down the middle with a loud thud, its carved surface snapping like dry wood. Gasps filled the air. The people looked around in confusion. Elders covered their mouths. Children clung to their mothers. A broken drum on the day of judgment was no accident. It was rejection. The ancestors had spoken. Ptolemy was not the chosen one. Ptolemy's face twisted in disbelief. "This is witchcraft," she shouted. "Fix the drum. This means nothing." But Ora Mabina stepped forward, her voice calm and steady. "Queen Ptolemy, the drum has never broken in the history of our land. It breaks only when someone unworthy dares to claim the throne." Ptolemy's hands trembled. Her voice turned to a whisper. "This is my kingdom. I raised the prince. I ruled after the king." But the villagers stood in silence. No one moved to support her. Even the ministers avoided her gaze. Then, a soft voice broke through the crowd. Adaku, in a simple blue gown, stepped forward. Her hands were empty, her feet bare. She did not claim the throne. She simply walked into the circle, her eyes lowered with respect. The moment her foot touched the center, the broken drum glowed softly. Then, against all logic, it repaired itself before everyone's eyes. The cracks vanished, the wood sealed, and suddenly, the drum roared, loud, deep, and powerful, echoing across the village. The people fell to their knees. The elders began to chant, "She is the chosen. She is the one." Ptolemy stood frozen. Her golden crown now looked like mockery. The ancestors had chosen, not by birth, not by wealth, but by heart, and Adaku had been seen. The crowd was still recovering from the shock of the broken drum repairing itself. Whispers ran through the villagers like wind through dry leaves. Eyes turned toward the palace gates as a soft rustle of feet approached. Adaku appeared, not in gold, not in jewels, but in a simple white robe, clean and untouched. Her steps were steady, her face calm, but her eyes held a quiet storm. In her hands, she held the weathered letter, sealed with the late king's mark. The villagers parted without being told. Even the elders stepped aside. No guards stopped her. It was as though the air around her demanded respect. She reached the sacred circle, lifted the letter, and held it high for all to see. Ora Mabina took it gently, reading the words aloud so every ear in Nkumbele would hear. "In the quiet of night, I, King Obannefa, have chosen Adaku, not by blood, but by strength, by grace, by fire unshaken, to be the one who will lead after me. Let the flames of the ancestors bear witness." Gasps echoed once more, followed by silence heavy enough to crush breath. Then, Ora pointed to the royal staff, the ancient rod carved by the first ruler of Nkumbele, resting on the altar beside the ancestral flame. "Let the fire speak," she said. Adaku stepped forward. Her fingers trembled slightly as they reached for the staff. Queen Ptolemy, still in shock, watched from the side, her lips parted but silent. The moment Adaku's hand touched the staff, the ancestral flame leapt, not wildly, but tall, golden, and steady. It wrapped around the staff like it recognized her, then shot upward into the sky like a blessing from the heavens. A warm wind blew through the circle, lifting Adaku's robe slightly, as if even the air bowed to her. Then came the sound that sealed everything, the people's voices. They didn't wait for an order, for a crown, or for ceremony. The chant began with one voice, then 10, then hundreds. "Adaku! Adaku! Adaku!" The elders dropped to one knee. The ministers followed. Even the guards lowered their swords and bowed their heads. Children ran forward with flowers. tossing them at her feet. Women cried. Men raised their fists in joy. Ptolemy took one shaky step back, her power melting under the weight of truth. Adaku looked out over the people. She didn't smile in pride. She nodded in gratitude. The throne, once so far from her reach, now stood behind her, empty, waiting, ready. And when she turned and sat, the throne itself let out a deep creak, like an old friend recognizing its true queen. There was no crown yet, but it didn't matter. Nkumbele had already accepted her. She had walked in wearing no jewels, no title, no fame, but the throne bowed, and her name would never be forgotten. After the great day when Adaku was crowned by the will of the ancestors, the palace became a place of change and reckoning. Queen Ptolemy, once proud and cruel, found her power slipping away faster than she could imagine. The elders, who had witnessed the truth, declared her unfit to rule. Without the king's favor or the people's respect, she was stripped of her royal titles. The grand halls she once commanded now felt cold and empty to her. No longer dressed in silk or gold, Ptolemy was sent away to the outskirts of Nkumbele village, a place where no royalty dared to go. There, in the harsh dirt and among strangers, Ptolemy's life crumbled. She who once gave orders was now reduced to begging for food and shelter. The villagers who had once feared her looked away, refusing her mercy. The sharpness in her eyes dulled, replaced by regret and sorrow. Her pride, which had pushed Adaku down so many times, was shattered by the reality of her downfall. She had forgotten one simple truth: cruelty never wins in the end. Meanwhile, in the mountains where he had hidden himself in grief, Prince Ezubu wrestled with his own pain. He had been silent, scared to stand up against his mother, but now the time had come to face the truth. Hearing of Adaku's rise and the justice she brought, he knew he had to return to Nkumbele. His heart was heavy, full of remorse for the suffering Adaku endured while he stayed quiet. When Ezubu came back, the people watched quietly, unsure how he would be received, but without hesitation, he walked straight to the palace. In front of the crowd and his mother's exile, he knelt down before Adaku. His voice was soft but full of meaning as he apologized for the pain he had caused her by his silence. The people whispered among themselves. This was a true sign of change, of healing. Adaku, now queen of Nkumbele, looked down at the prince. Her eyes held no anger, only wisdom. She helped him rise and spoke gently about forgiveness and strength. It was clear she ruled not with revenge, but with grace. Her time as the silent sufferer had shaped her into a leader who understood pain but chose kindness. Sitting on the throne once denied to her, Adaku's presence was calm and powerful. Her people had witnessed her journey, from a girl treated like a slave to the true queen. She ruled wisely, listening to the people's needs, settling disputes fairly, and caring for the weak. Under her reign, the village flourished. Justice became more than a word. It was a living, breathing truth in Nkumbele. As for Ptolemy, her fall was complete. She lived in quiet shame, a reminder to all that cruelty and greed only lead to ruin. The villagers often spoke of how the throne had chosen a queen not by blood or wealth, but by heart and strength. Adaku's story became a legend, proof that true power belongs to those who serve with kindness, not those who demand it. In the end, the village of Nkumbele was forever changed. The throne sat under a queen who earned respect with every decision, and the name Adaku was remembered as a symbol of hope, justice, and true leadership. If you felt the journey of Adaku, from being treated like a slave to rising as the true queen, touch your heart, then remember this: no matter how hard life tries to break you, your strength and kindness can change your destiny. Adaku's story shows us that real power doesn't come from wealth or status, but from courage, forgiveness, and the will to stand tall even when the world turns against you. Think about those moments when you felt powerless or overlooked. Like Adaku, you have the power to rise, to rewrite your story, and to shine brighter than anyone ever expected. Never let anyone's cruelty define who you are. Instead, let your spirit be stronger, your heart kinder, and your actions wiser. If this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs hope today. Like this video to show your support for stories that remind us of the power inside each of us. And please, subscribe to this channel to join a community that believes in justice, kindness, and the triumph of the human spirit. Your support means the world to me, and it helps bring more inspiring stories like Adaku's to life. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, your story is not over yet. Your throne is waiting. Stay strong and keep believing.